Tell me about feedback loops.
Well, so that's this idea that is kind of the mechanism. That's the strategy, which boils down to it's not my idea. It's an idea that's been out there for decades, really, especially in talking about behavioral theory, and it specifically comes out of a fellow Albert Bandura of Stanford, who was doing this work in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, and it's simply the recognition that when you give people when you give them targeted information, and when you give them a clear set on what the goal is and where they stand in relation to that goal, and you let them learn from their mistakes and their successes, basically, that's feedback. And when you can quantify that and really deliver that as much more granular, on a very granular level, you're able to move the dial on behavior really effectively. Now, the catch is that the mechanism for that, the kind of starting point, is personalized targeted information, which has been hard to come by. So it's not easy to get, right? I mean, that's why we go to therapists for personal information. We go to diet counselors. We go to Weight Watchers. We go to all these services, right? There's in fact huge service industries that are built around giving people personalized targeted information. It's expensive. And so not everyone has access to it, and it is not an easy thing to get. There's a phrase that we use in technology. There's a lot of friction involved, a lot of kind of transaction costs in terms of just getting the information. But lo and behold, that's changing now. So you're able to create that starting point for feedback loops, personalized information, much more organically, and it exists in much more areas than we might have looked for, because of new things like sensors and monitors and just better design, really.
In fact, you've conducted an experiment in the design of labeling, for example, medical products.
This was lab tests. So we did this. We did this. It was a trial balloon, basically. That Wired magazine is not in the business of designing lab tests. But as an experiment, as a thought experiment, we thought it would be an interesting area of basically to give a makeover. So you see this, you see this from time to time on the internet. You see kind of a board designer who looks at an airplane boarding pass and says, "This is horrible design. I'm going to give it a makeover." And so they create using that same template of a piece of cardboard, delivers that information in a way that actually you can be at the airport, running through the airport, and you can understand what gate you're supposed to go to and what time your airplane leaves, which is all you really wanted to know at that point. So we took that same kind of thinking and brought it to lab tests, which is slightly more complicated and slightly more fraught than an airplane boarding pass. But you get a blood test. You ask your doctor, I should say, for a blood test. You don't get the results directly, but it goes to your doctor. And if you're so bold as to ask for a copy of your blood test, it's near impossible to make sense of what that jumble of numbers and dashes and things is actually saying. There's no attempt to communicate the information using the not really revolutionary ideas of information design. So that's what we did. We just decided that we were going to kind of give it a makeover and help deliver that information in a compelling way and make it IWF, information with feeling.
Right. And much more accessible, obviously, to the person. I mean, I saw the examples to the patient. You also mentioned some clever variations, sort of on this. You mentioned the Proteus Smart Pill.
Right.
You mentioned glow caps. Where does all of this fit in with your basic premise?
So those two companies, Proteus and Vitality, who has their glow caps products, those are to me examples. I'm not endorsing them, but I think they're smart examples of people using these ideas of feedback and using the availability of cheap sensors and cheap kind of data gathering tools to help provide these kind of mechanisms or catalysts to change for people. So in the case of Proteus, it's a little chip inside the pill that sends out a signal and lets you know basically if you're taking your pills on time. And it also connects that with a range of other biometric information that helps basically people do home-based monitoring. Now that's been talked about for decades, really, but it tends to be the difference. I think is those things tend to be very very clinical tools, extremely laced in the kind of, they seem like they're the hospital coming to your house rather than something that you would use next to your iPad or your iPod. And I think that's what's different. That's what's different about these new tools, is that they reflect the values and the origins of good product design and good information technology that we experience in the rest of our lives. Mm-hmm. Too often, technology, when it's come into healthcare, has been kind of pathologized, and it's not friendly. Mm-hmm. It's not friendly at all. If you look at diabetes monitors, glucose monitors, things like that, they're really unfriendly, quite hostile tools, because oftentimes, frankly, they're not designed for the user. They're designed for the insurance company or the provider, somebody else who's paying. And so I think that what we're moving into is a era where we're starting to recognize that the tools and things we've learned in information and consumer technology design are really applicable and very powerful when it comes to healthcare.